My friends, I want to tell you about the first night I spent entirely alone in my own home, following my wife's passing in my late 60s, a night I had dreaded for weeks beforehand, certain it would confirm every fear I carried about what the remainder of my life alone might genuinely feel like. I remember standing in my kitchen that evening, the house entirely silent in a way it had not been in over 40 years, and bracing myself for an unbearable wave of emptiness I was certain was about to arrive. What actually arrived surprised me considerably, though it took me a long time afterward to fully understand why. The silence, rather than immediately confirming my worst fears, simply existed, neutral and unremarkable in itself, waiting for me to decide what I would make of it. I want to be honest with you that this particular night was genuinely difficult, filled with real grief that I do not wish to minimize or romanticize in any way. But somewhere within that difficulty, I noticed something I had never expected to notice, a kind of clarity that the noise and business of my previous, fuller life had somehow always kept me from fully accessing. I have spent the years since that first night slowly, sometimes painfully, coming to understand something about peace that I do not believe I ever could have learned any other way, something that living entirely alone, for the first time in my adult life, taught me with a directness that no book, no sermon, and no well-meaning advice from friends ever could have provided. I want to share with you today everything I have come to understand about this particular truth, and the many different corners of my solitary life where it has continued revealing itself, again and again, in ways that have genuinely transformed how I understand peace itself. The single truth underlying everything I am about to share is this: peace was never actually something other people, activity, or noise provided me. It was always something available within my own quiet presence, and living alone simply removed enough of the surrounding noise, both external and internal, for me to finally discover that this peace had been there, patiently waiting, the entire time. For most of my life, I believed that peace depended on circumstances outside myself, a full house, a busy calendar, the reassuring presence of other people nearby. I finally understood, through the direct, unavoidable experience of genuine solitude, that peace had never actually required any of these external conditions, and that my previous fuller, noisier life had, in certain ways, actually been obscuring rather than providing the genuine peace I had always assumed it was delivering. Everything that follows is simply this one truth, appearing across the many different rooms of my solitary life where it eventually revealed itself clearly. The first place this truth revealed itself was in learning to eat meals in complete silence, without television, radio, or any other background noise, something I had genuinely never once done across my entire previous adult life. I discovered, somewhat to my surprise, that this silent eating, which I initially dreaded as a stark reminder of my aloneness, gradually became one of the more peaceful moments of my entire day, allowing me to genuinely taste and appreciate my food in a way the constant background noise of my previous, fuller household had never actually permitted. The second place this truth revealed itself was in learning to sit in a room with absolutely nothing scheduled, no visitor expected, no task requiring completion, simply present in my own quiet company for an entire unstructured hour. I discovered that my initial discomfort with this kind of unstructured solitude gradually transformed, over many months of practice, into a genuine capacity to simply be present with myself, a capacity I had never once developed during the many decades when other people's presence and various obligations had always filled every available quiet moment before I had ever needed to develop this particular skill. The third place this truth revealed itself was in noticing how my own thoughts, once given genuine space to unfold without interruption, gradually settled into something considerably calmer and more coherent than the scattered, reactive thinking that had characterized most of my previous, busier decades. I recognized that the near-constant presence of other people and activities throughout my earlier life had never actually allowed my own mind sufficient quiet to fully settle, and that genuine solitude, uncomfortable as it initially felt, gradually revealed a mental clarity I had rarely, if ever, experienced during the more crowded decades that preceded it. The fourth place this truth revealed itself was in learning to genuinely enjoy my own company during a solo trip I finally took roughly a year into living alone, a trip I had initially dreaded as confirmation of my aloneness but that gradually revealed itself as one of the more genuinely peaceful experiences of my entire life. I discovered that traveling entirely alone, without needing to accommodate anyone else's preferences or schedule, allowed me a freedom and presence I had never previously experienced, moving through each day entirely according to my own genuine rhythm rather than the constant negotiation that traveling with others, however lovingly, had always required. The fifth place this truth revealed itself was in noticing that my anxiety about upcoming visits from family and friends, anxiety I had never previously recognized as connected to genuine solitude, gradually decreased once I had developed a stronger foundation of comfort within my own quiet company first. I came to understand that my earlier difficulty enjoying time alone had, in certain ways, made me somewhat dependent on others' presence to regulate my own emotional state, a dependency that gradually eased once I discovered I could genuinely regulate this state myself, through the peace solitude itself had taught me to access. The sixth place this truth revealed itself was in learning to sleep alone in my own bed without the particular anxiety I had originally expected, an anxiety that, once genuinely examined, revealed itself as considerably more about an old fear of aloneness itself than any actual, present danger my solitary sleeping arrangement genuinely posed. I discovered, gradually, that my own quiet bedroom, once I had moved through the initial grief and adjustment, became a genuinely peaceful space rather than the source of dread I had originally anticipated it would remain indefinitely. The seventh place this truth revealed itself was in noticing how differently I began experiencing ordinary household tasks, cooking, cleaning, gardening, once these tasks were performed in genuine solitude rather than alongside another person's presence and preferences. I discovered a particular quality of focused, meditative attention available during these solitary tasks that shared activity, however pleasant, had never quite allowed, a quality of presence that gradually revealed itself as its own genuine source of peace I had simply never previously accessed. The eighth place this truth revealed itself was in learning to distinguish clearly between loneliness and solitude, two experiences I had previously treated as essentially identical, but that I gradually came to understand as genuinely, meaningfully different. I recognized that loneliness reflected an unwanted absence of connection, while solitude, properly understood and practiced, reflected a genuinely chosen, peaceful presence with myself, a distinction that transformed how I experienced many of my own quiet hours once I finally learned to recognize which of these two experiences I was actually having in any given moment. The ninth place this truth revealed itself was in noticing that my own capacity for genuine gratitude deepened considerably once I had more quiet space in which to actually notice and appreciate the small, ordinary blessings of an unhurried day. I discovered that my previous, busier life had rarely afforded me the genuine stillness required to fully notice these small blessings, a particular quality of afternoon light, the taste of a well-prepared meal, and that solitude, rather than diminishing my gratitude, actually deepened and sharpened it considerably. The 10th place this truth revealed itself was in learning that my own relationship with prayer and spiritual reflection deepened considerably once genuine solitude offered the sustained quiet these practices had always required but that my previous, busier life had rarely provided in sufficient measure. I recognized that years of relatively superficial spiritual practice, squeezed into brief moments between other obligations, gradually gave way to something considerably deeper and more genuine once solitude finally offered the sustained space these practices had always genuinely needed. The 11th place this truth revealed itself was in noticing that visits from family and friends, once I had developed genuine comfort with my own solitary peace, became considerably more enjoyable and less anxiously anticipated than they had been during the earlier months when I still depended on their presence to escape an aloneness I had not yet learned to genuinely inhabit. I discovered that I could finally welcome these visits from a place of genuine abundance rather than anxious need, enjoying the company for its own sake rather than as an escape from a solitude I had not yet learned to find peaceful in its own right. The 12th place this truth revealed itself was in recognizing that my own physical space, arranged entirely according to my own preferences without any need for compromise or accommodation, became a genuine source of peace I had never previously experienced during the many decades of shared living that had always required at least some degree of negotiation and adjustment. I discovered a particular satisfaction in a home organized entirely around my own genuine preferences, a satisfaction that, while born from genuine loss, nonetheless revealed itself as an authentic, unexpected gift within the broader grief of my changed circumstances. The 13th place this truth revealed itself was in noticing that my own creative pursuits, taken up more seriously during these solitary years, flourished considerably more fully in genuine quiet than they ever had during the busier decades when creative time had always needed to compete with numerous other obligations and interruptions. I discovered that genuine solitude offered exactly the sustained, uninterrupted attention that meaningful creative work has always required, attention my previous, fuller life had rarely been able to provide in sufficient measure. The 14th place this truth revealed itself was in learning to distinguish, over time, between the specific hours of my day when solitude felt genuinely peaceful and the specific hours when it felt considerably heavier, a distinction I had not initially expected but that gradually revealed a clear, consistent pattern once I began paying honest attention to it. I discovered that early mornings and quiet evenings consistently brought me the deepest sense of peace, while certain late afternoon hours, coinciding with the time my wife and I had once shared our daily conversation about the day's events, remained considerably more difficult even years into this new solitary rhythm. Recognizing this pattern allowed me to plan my days with greater self-compassion, scheduling a phone call with a friend or a walk through the neighborhood during these specific harder hours, rather than expecting uniform peace across every hour equally. The 15th place this truth revealed itself was in noticing how my relationship with silence itself gradually transformed over the years, from something I initially needed to fill or escape to something I eventually began actively seeking out and protecting, even during periods when companionship was genuinely available to me. I recognized, several years into this solitary life, that I had begun turning down certain invitations specifically to protect particular evenings of genuine quiet, a preference that would have seemed entirely foreign to the version of myself who once filled every possible hour with activity and company, and a preference that revealed just how genuinely, permanently my relationship with solitude itself had changed. The 16th place this truth revealed itself was in recognizing that the peace I had discovered through solitude did not require me to remain entirely alone in order to be sustained, but rather taught me something I could carry into renewed companionship as well, whenever this companionship eventually arrived back into my life through friendship, family, or the occasional new connection. I discovered, visiting with friends or welcoming my children into my home, that I now brought a considerably calmer, more settled presence to these interactions than I had once been able to offer, no longer needing their company to escape an inner emptiness, but instead simply enjoying their company as a genuine addition to a peace that no longer depended entirely on their presence to exist in the first place. And the 17th and final form this single truth takes, the one that ties every other form together, is simply this: peace was never something I needed other people or activity to provide me, and living entirely alone simply removed enough of the surrounding noise for me to finally discover that this peace had always been available within my own quiet presence, waiting patiently for the busyness of my previous life to finally grow quiet enough to reveal it. For most of my life, I believed that peace depended on full houses, busy calendars, and the reassuring presence of others nearby. I finally understood, through the direct, unavoidable experience of genuine solitude, that peace had never actually required any of these external conditions, that it had, in truth, been available within my own quiet presence all along, simply waiting for enough silence to finally let it be heard. My friends, I want to be honest with you that I did not choose this particular teacher. Living alone arrived through loss, not through any deliberate decision on my part, and I do not want to suggest that I would trade my beloved wife's presence for any lesson, however valuable, that her absence eventually taught me. Grief remains genuinely real within this solitary life, present alongside the peace I have described today rather than replaced by it entirely. But I have come to believe that this particular grief and this particular peace can genuinely coexist, each honest and real in its own right, without either one cancelling out or diminishing the other. I think often of that first difficult night, standing in my silent kitchen, certain the silence would confirm my worst fears about the remainder of my life. I could not have known, standing there that evening, that this same silence would eventually become one of my most genuine teachers, revealing a truth about peace I do not believe I ever would have discovered any other way. I do not say this to suggest that solitude is somehow superior to companionship, or that everyone should seek out this particular teacher deliberately. I say it simply because I believe this truth, once genuinely understood, remains valuable and available regardless of whether your own life happens to be full of companionship or genuinely solitary, a truth that peace, at its deepest and most genuine level, has never actually depended on the noise and company we so often assume it requires. I want to share one further reflection before we close, something a hospice chaplain once told me during a difficult period several years into this new chapter of my life. She said that in her many years of sitting with people in their final days, she had noticed something she found genuinely striking, that the people who seemed to approach their own final passage with the most genuine peace were very often not the ones who had surrounded themselves most constantly with activity and company throughout their lives, but the ones who had, at some point, learned to be genuinely at peace within their own quiet company as well. She suggested, gently, that this particular skill, cultivated deliberately or, as in my own case, through circumstance, may be one of the more valuable preparations any of us can make for whatever solitude our own final years may eventually require of us, a preparation solitude itself, however unwelcome its arrival, had already quietly begun teaching me. If you are watching this today, whether you live alone as I now do, or whether your life remains full of companionship and noise, I want you to know that the peace I have described today remains genuinely available to you as well, waiting quietly beneath whatever business or company currently fills your days, ready to be discovered the moment you finally allow yourself enough genuine quiet to hear it clearly. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. I hope something I shared helps you recognize the genuine peace available within your own quiet presence, whether you access this presence through circumstance, as I did, or through deliberate, chosen practice within a fuller life. Take care of yourselves, my friends. Seek out genuine quiet, even briefly, and trust that the peace waiting there was never actually dependent on anything outside yourself at all. Until next time, this has been Eternal Flame Wisdom. Stay quiet, stay present, and remember, the peace you have been searching for out there was always waiting, patiently, in here. Thank you for watching.